Just the lead up makes me feel like I'm dying. Hi. Hi, Lady Eva. We are live now. Okay. Just so you know. So I know you're over there playing a game.
That's me.
Dad's here playing Borderlands in the background.
Hello.
Hi, Toshi. Hi. Yay. Ray, Denny, Crimson, Swipblood. Yeah, Chris is here in person. They want to know if you're having fun.
Oh, buckets of fun. Just headshot a dude.
You're playing pre-sequel right now? Oh, okay. I have not played that one. But yeah, Dad's over here playing Borderlands. We were gonna go get food, and then by the time we got food, I was like, well, it's late. You just want to hang out at my house until it's time to go live, so that is where we're at now. Sorry I'm late. I lost everything that I own right before the live started. So I was like, right before I went live, I was like, I don't know where my phone is. Like, so that was fun. As one does, yeah. I was setting everything up, and then I have no idea what we're gonna stream tonight because we finished Outer Worlds. So I was debating on what we were gonna play, and then I lost track of time, and it was like 5 minutes before, and I was like, okay, well, I basically have everything set up. All the electronics are plugged in, and then I lose my phone right before it, and then my coffee, and then you get it. So the second I sit down, and I'm like, okay, ready. Where is? If you want, we can play Cozy Grove, but the thing is about Cozy Grove is it's designed for you to only be able to complete it so much in a day. And it's not that long of like actual content before it's just sort of resource farming. If you want me to resource farm, I will do so. I'm having a fun time making a fence and making everybody mad about it. It's not even a fence. It's a brick wall now. I had a fence. It's upgraded to a brick wall. Cozy tunes too, though. Yeah, that is true. It's got hella chill vibes. Hella chill vibes. I've also been replaying Amnesia for like the first time in like 10 years. So, I also no offense. Yeah, the good one. Props for that one. Also got Borderlands, which I beat the first game and then never beat the second one. And I was playing the second one on my laptop when my laptop at the time kind of died. And I haven't really had anything that will run it or like do any sort of PC gaming. I still have not finished it. And I have the prequel, and I have 3 on my laptop, but I can't play it on my laptop. Which was kind of like, I don't know why I purchased it on there, knowing that I had like a highfalutin idea that I was gonna get a gaming PC at one point in time, like I was gonna be able to afford that. You wonder how that worked out. It didn't. So I just have Borderlands 3 on my Steam account that I can't play on anything. So that is how that worked out. 3 is good, but not the best one repeatability wise. I'll take your word for it. I'll have to, because Oh yeah, such lofty dreams I used to have. So I got Borderlands on there, so I was thinking it was either between like Amnesia, we could revisit Cult of the Lamb, see how our cult's doing. We still have some content we need to get through on there. Um, I'm not sure what happens when you get all of the talismans for the particular fleece that you're wearing when you're doing the dungeon run throughs. I'm not sure if something happens there, um, or if it's just like an achievement thing. Which it's fine if it's just an achievement thing. I just want to know about the lore. um, and until I know if there's lore involved, I'm going to assume that there is lore. Don't know what happens. But we still have plenty of cult members who are still alive. We've lost many along the way, most of them named Wen Chao. But we could reboot Cult of the Lamb. I have Amnesia, Borderlands. We could also do Cozy Grove if you want to. So it's up to you, because I legitimately was like trying to like figure out what we were gonna do and giving myself anxiety about it for no reason. Anyway, it's good to be back. So I missed last week. Unfortunately, I was out of town. Also, I threw out my back, so that was super fun. I'm doing better now. The back works. I can sit, so that's an improvement. But we still have the tail end of Map of Days to get through. We have 2 chapters left. Now, if it's your first time here and you've stumbled in here completely unaware of what's happening, this is a book club. I don't just sit here and talk the whole time, because who would listen to me otherwise? And we've been reading Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. We're on book 4, Map of Days, and we're at the last 2 chapters. So if you need a little bit of a refresher, Jacob and his friends, his peculiar friends, went to rescue a peculiar who had been uncontacted on the orders of H, or Jacob's grandfather, Abraham Portman's colleague, friend, unsure, little shaky, sent them to go contact this familiar living in America. Now, they had, up until this book, had not really had many dealings in America and did not know the territory well, which is somewhat of a detriment, as they left without their Imbrin, Miss Peregrine, and journeyed through half the country and got into all sorts of shenanigans that they probably wouldn't have otherwise. Now, they've contacted Noor, but have been basically told to back off at the last minute, where they went for some continental food, which, if you remember, is bad. It didn't go too well. They ended up almost being sold on a peculiar-esque black market sort of deal. A little bit shaky on the bylaws in America there, where they ended up being captured by one of the larger territory owners, Leo, who told Jacob all sorts of stuff about his grandfather, including some things that maybe he didn't know, and is pretty questionable about his grandfather's character. Luckily, Miss Peregrine showed up in the nick of time to basically bail them out. So, all's well that ends well. So why are there 2 chapters left? Well, we're not done yet. Raise his hand, I would. I'm assuming about the listening comment. Anyway, who's ready for chapter 18? Are we good to go? You got your beverages? Yeah, I'd say Amnesia, but isn't that like super dark? It's like a horror game, but it's very Lovecraft in the way that it's like, oh, what was that sound? Like, there's not really a lot of overt, like, monsters or, like, but if you do get scared easily, there's, like, some jump scare elements. So, 2, we're all good to go. All right, excellent. Hold on. Let me... Chapter 18. We were brought back to Devil's Acre via a Manhattan Loop entrance that connected to the Panlupticon, a route that would have saved my friends and me days of driving and untold trouble if only we'd known about it. I was spared an immediate tongue lashing because I was injured. Instead, the Embrins brought me to a bone mender named Raphael, who worked out of a tumble-down house on Little Stabbing Street. For the rest of the day and all that night, I lay in a room filled with apothecary bottles while he applied stinging powders and pungent poultices to my wounds. He was no Mother Dust, but I could feel myself beginning to heal. I was confined to the bed, mostly sleepless, haunted by failures and doubts and guilt. If only I had listened to H. If only I had aborted the mission when he'd begged me to. Haunted by the things Leo had said about my grandfather. Not that I thought they could be true. Of course, he had been framed by whites. It's the only explanation that made any sense. But the simple fact that anyone would fabricate such lies about him made me deeply uncomfortable. I would have to set that right if I could ever get H to talk to me again, but I was haunted primarily by guilt about Nor. If she had never met me at all, she'd be safer than she was now. Hunted, yes, but at least she'd be free. My friends came to see me in the morning. Emma, Millard, Bronwyn, and Enoch, too, who recounted how he had come out of Frankie's odd trance to find himself dressed in doll's clothes, which he took off as fast as he could before running away. "We think he woke up when I tackled Frankie," said Emma. "She let go of us all, and that must have broken her hold on Enoch, too." "She's quite powerful to have been able to influence people remotely that way," said Millard. "I'll have to include her in my new book, Who's Who in Peculiar America." "I can control people remotely, too," said Enoch, "provided they're dead." "It's too bad. You would have made a cute couple," I said. Enoch leaned over my bed and flicked a bruise on my arm, and I yelped. They told me Miss Peregrine hadn't talked to them yet, not even to reprimand them. She'd hardly said a word to any of us since we'd returned, other than to warn us not to leave the acre. "She's still too angry," said Emma. "I've never seen her like this." "Me neither," said Bronwyn. "Not even the time my brother sank the Cairnholm ferry with all of us aboard." "What if they excommunicate us from Peculiardom?" said Emma. "You can't be excommunicated from Peculiardom," Enoch said. "Can you?" "This whole thing was such an awful idea," Bronwyn said miserably. "We were doing fine until you got shot with that sleep dart, or whatever it was," said Enoch. "So it's my fault." "We never would have gotten stuck in Frankie's loop trap if we hadn't had to go looking for a hospital. It's nobody's fault," I said. "We just had some bad luck." "If it weren't that, something else would have gotten us," said Emma. "I'm amazed we made it as far as we did. Considering the vastness of our ignorance, we were fools to think we could do a mission in America with so little preparation and training." She glanced at me briefly, then looked away. There was only one A. Portman. It was a cheap shot, but it stung. With painful effort, I sat up in bed. His partner thought we were prepared. He gave us the mission. "And I would very much like to know why," came a voice from the doorway. We turned to see Miss Peregrine leaning against the jamb, holding an unlit pipe. How long had she been there? Everyone tensed, ready for a dressing down. Miss Peregrine walked in, surveying the room and all its equipment. I don't suppose you children know how much trouble you've caused. She stopped in the middle of the floor. You must have been very worried, said Millard. She turned her head sharply toward him and narrowed her eyes. It was clear we were not yet welcome to speak. I was, yes, but not only about you people. She spoke with uncharacteristic coldness. We have been engaged for some months, even before the Hologast menace subsided, in an effort to negotiate peace between the American clans. Your actions have thrown those efforts into dire jeopardy. We didn't know, I said quietly. You and Miss Cuckoo said the Imbrans were busy with the reconstruction effort. It was top secret Imbran business, she said. It would never have occurred to me that I would need to caution my own wards against striking out on their own into dangerous and poorly charted territory. Not only without permission, but without even telling me, in order to conduct some ill-conceived rescue mission assigned to you by an unknown and utterly untrustworthy source. Her tone rose shrilly, and then she paused, rubbing a knuckle into her eye. Excuse me, I haven't slept in days. She took a match from her dress pocket, lifted her foot, and struck it deftly against the sole and lit her pipe. When she'd taken a few meditative puffs, she continued. The other Imbrans and I worked around the clock to negotiate your release from Leo Burnham's Five Boroughs clan. It's quite a complex thing when the very people who are trying to broker a peace treaty are accused of committing high crimes. Miss Peregrine let that sink in for a moment before she went on. America is badly divided. Here's the gist of it, which I share now only because I want to impress upon you how difficult you've made things. There are three major factions. The Five Boroughs clan, whose influence extends through much of the East Coast, the Invisible Hand, with power concentrated in Detroit, and the Californios in the West, with Los Angeles as its capital. Texas and the South are autonomous, semi-lawless zones, which have resisted efforts to centralize control in any one loop. An unfortunate situation that has only worsened societal rifts. But tensions among the big three are the primary concern. They have long-standing boundary disputes, old grudges, and the like. But for 100 years, the threat of Hologast attacks seriously reduced their mobility and prevented occasional skirmishes from escalating into war. Now that the Hollows are mostly gone, however, the skirmishes are worsening. In other words, we couldn't have picked a worse time to go blundering in, said Millard. You could not have, Miss Peregrine agreed, especially given the delicate work we Imbrans have taken on. I had heard some of this before, but my friends had not. They looked deflated and horrified. I get why the situation is delicate, I said. I just don't understand why trying to help one peculiar in need was such a terrible thing. It wouldn't have been in Europe, said Miss Peregrine. But in America, it's a serious offense. But my grandfather spent his whole career finding and helping uncontacted peculiars. Years ago, she said, nearly shouting. Conventions change, Mr. Portman. Laws are rewritten. And if you had simply asked me, or any Imbran, we would have told you that the Americans are territorial, and what was an act of heroism 25 years ago is now considered a capital offense. But why? Because the most valuable resource in peculiardom is us, peculiars. If two loops are in conflict with each other, they need as many peculiars in their ranks as they can find to be fighters, bone menders, runners, invisible spies, and so on. An army. But we peculiars have a very limited population from which to recruit. And thanks to the evil hunger of the Hollows, new peculiars were hard to find for a very long time. They got snapped up, quite literally, starved of new blood. Peculiar populations grew older and became loop-bound. An army that can't stray far from its loop for fear of aging forward isn't very effective. So there is really nothing more valuable in peculiardom than a never contacted peculiar, especially a powerfully talented one. Why didn't H tell us that? I said. He must have known helping Nor would make the local clans angry. I'd like to ask him that same question, Miss Peregrine said angrily, and several more as well. I'm sure his motives were virtuous, said Millard. She was being hunted by some very nasty people. Helping her might have been virtuous, said Miss Peregrine. Involving my wards in the matter was not. We're so sorry, said Emma. I hope you can believe that. Miss Peregrine ignored her, as she had ignored all our attempts to apologize. She went to the window and blew a cloud of pipe smoke out toward the humming street. We were making progress in our peace talks. But this episode has seriously damaged the clan's trust in us. The neutral party cannot be suspected of having any agenda other than peace. It's a bad setback. Do you think they'll go to war? Asked Millard. Because of us? We may yet have an opportunity to mend things, but the clans are quite far apart on a number of key issues. They must agree on territorial boundaries, elect a peacekeeping council. These are no small matters, and the stakes are considerable. If war should break out between them, it would be a disaster not only for American peculiars, but for all of us. War is a germ that can rarely be contained. it would surely spread. Judging from our slumped shoulders and downcast expressions, all of us were feeling intense shame. I was starting to regret everything, even reaching out to H in the first place. After what felt like a long time, Miss Peregrine turned to look at us. "Worse than any of that," she said, sighing. "Worse than the clan's not trusting us is that I feel I can no longer trust you." "Don't say that, miss. Don't say that," pleaded Bronwyn. "I think I'm perhaps most disappointed in you, Miss Bruntley. This sort of behavior isn't so surprising from Miss Bloom or Mr. O'Connor, but you have always been so loyal and kind." I'll make it up to you," Bronwyn said. "I promise." "You'll start by working on the kitchen cleanup crew here in the acre for 1 month. Yes, of course," said Bronwyn, nodding eagerly. She seemed relieved to have a punishment, which meant forgiveness was possible. "Miss Bloom, I'm reassigning you to the Smoking Street garbage incinerator." I saw Emma wince, but she said nothing. "Mr. O'Connor, you'll be sweeping chimneys. Mr. Nullings—" "Miss Peregrine?" I interrupted her. She stopped mid-sentence. My friends looked at me with various shades of disbelief. "What is it?" said Miss Peregrine. I knew that what I was about to ask would be met with a barrage of resistance, but I had to say it anyway. "What about Nor?" "What about her?" said Miss Peregrine. I knew her patience was wearing thin, but I couldn't let this go. "We just left her there," I said. "I'm aware of what happened," Miss Peregrine said, "and if it had been possible to bring her back to the acre with us, I would have done it. But it took all the leverage I had to secure your release. To then insist upon taking her too would have made it seem as if it were her we'd wanted all along. That we really were after their uncontacted peculiars, and that would have derailed the peace talks." Miss Peregrine had a point, but she was talking about politics, and I was talking about a person. Couldn't we avoid war and save Nor? And so I persisted. "Leo's crazy and dangerous," I said. "I know it would look bad, so maybe there's a way we can sneak her out, so they wouldn't know it was us." Emma was shooting me daggers with her eyes. "Stop," she mouthed. Miss Peregrine was about to lose it, I could tell. "Mr. Portman," she said, "if that girl's in danger, it is your fault. I cannot believe, after all I just told you, that you're still insisting we attempt to remove her from that loop. I simply can't believe it. I know it's my fault, and I admit that." I was talking fast, trying to make my point without pushing Miss Peregrine too far. But you should have seen the people who were after her. They had helicopters and, special ops tactical gear. "Obviously, that was one of the other clans." "It wasn't, though," I said, talking over her now. "Leo's guys didn't know who they were." "Mr. Portman, there's something special about her. Something important. I have this feeling. Mr. Portman. Jacob, desist, Millard hissed at me. I just don't think H would have sent us after her if she weren't important. You know, he's not an idiot. Mr. Portman, she is none of your concern, Miss Peregrine yelled. I had never heard her shout like that. The room went quiet. Even the street noise coming through the window seemed hushed. She was trembling with anger. Sometimes imperfect situations must be tolerated in order to achieve the greater good, she said, struggling to control her tone. The safety of one cannot outweigh the safety of thousands. I was angry too, which is why I couldn't come up with anything more articulate to say than, "Well, that sucks." Bronwyn gasped. No one spoke to Miss Peregrine that way. Miss Peregrine took a step forward, leaning over me in my bed. Yes, Mr. Portman, it sucks. But deciding between choices that suck is precisely why being a leader can suck, which is precisely the reason we don't and will never involve children in high-level leadership decisions. She said the word children so pointedly it felt like she was throwing it in our faces. I saw Emma's brow furrow. Miss Peregrine? She said. Miss Peregrine turned sharply to face her as if daring her to speak. What is it, Miss Bloom? We aren't children anymore. Yes, she said. You are. You have proven that today. And she turned on her heel and stalked out of the room. Miss Peregrine left a stunned silence in her wake. When the sound of her footfalls leaving the house had faded, my friends found their voices. You're such an ass, Portman, said Enoch. You made her even madder, rambling on about that girl. If one of you were still in that loop, we'd all be worried, I said. Why shouldn't we worry about her? It's none of our concern, Bronwyn mumbled, like Miss P said. They're not going to kill her or anything, said Enoch. She's got to be safer with Leo's people than she was hiding from helicopters in some abandoned building. We don't know that, I said. The mission was to get her to a safe loop, not just drop her off wherever. Forget the bloody mission, Emma exploded. There is no mission anymore. Mission over. Mission stupid to begin with. Agreed, said Bronwyn. We should just forget it ever happened and hope the Imbrins forgive us. It was partly their fault, I said. None of this would have happened if they had just told us what was going on. I didn't know they were forging some peace accord. Don't try and pin this on the Imbrins, Bronwyn said. They treat us like idiots. I said, you all said it yourselves. I don't know about you, said Bronwyn, but after seeing how the Americans live, I'm glad we have Imbrins, and I'm never going to complain about them again. So if that's what we're doing right now, please count me out. I'm not complaining, I'm just saying we're not their equals, Jacob. And you aren't either. I mean, it's really great what you did for everybody in the Library of Souls, but just because you're a famous hero and people want your autograph doesn't mean you're as important as an Imbrin. I never said I was. Well, you're acting like you are. So if Miss Peregrine wants to keep a secret from you, I'm sure there's a good reason. And that's the end of it. Bronwyn turned and went out, leaving another silence behind her. What about the rest of you? I said. What about us what? Emma said sourly. Swiftlet. What happened to being independent? Making our own decisions? Is that all out the window now that Miss P is pissed at us? Don't be purposefully thick, said Enoch. We could have started a war. Miss Peregrine has every right to be furious with us, said Emma. I agree that we are often treated like children, said Millard, but we picked a bad time to assert our independence. We couldn't have known that, I said, but just because we made one mistake doesn't mean we should give up completely. Yes, it does, said Enoch. In this case, it does. I'm going to put my head down, sweep some chimneys, and hope things go back to normal soon. What a heroic sentiment, I said. Enoch laughed, but I could tell I'd hurt him. He came up to my bed, pulled some wilted daisies from his pocket, and tossed them onto my blanket. You're no hero either, he said. You're not Abe Portman, and you're never gonna be. So why don't you just stop trying? And he walked out. I felt frozen. I didn't know what to say. I'd better be going too, Millard mumbled. I don't want the headmistress to think we're... I couldn't hear the rest of what he said. What? Conspiring? Something like that, he said. What about the others? Are they coming to see me? I hadn't seen Horace, Hugh, Olive, or Claire since we'd left on the mission, which felt like a lifetime ago. I don't think so, said Millard. See you later, Jacob. I didn't like how this was ending. I could feel a line being drawn with me on one side and everyone else on the other. Millard left, his coat and pants floating out the door, and now I was alone with Emma, and she was moving toward the exit too. Don't leave, I said, a sudden shameful desperation coming over me. I really should. I'm sorry, Jacob. It doesn't have to be over. This is just a setback. Stop. Please. Her eyes were brimming with tears, and so I realized were mine. It does. It does have to be over. We'll get H on the phone somehow, talk about what happened, what to do next. Listen, Jacob, please listen. She pressed her palms together and touched the tips of her fingers to her lips, prayerful, pleading. You're not Abe, she said. You're not Abe. And I'm afraid if you keep trying to be, it will kill you. She turned away slowly, the doorway framing her, and walked out. I lay in bed listening to noise from the street, thinking, dreaming, talking with Raphael when he came in to sprinkle me with strange dust. I drifted in and out of an uneasy sleep. My emotions swung between anger and regret. Yes, I felt abandoned by my friends. Could I even call them that anymore? But part of me understood why they'd refused to take my side. They had risked a lot for me and nearly lost it all. I didn't know if you could be excommunicated from peculiardom, but I imagined we'd all come close. I was angry at Emma, too, for what she'd done, for what she'd said, for walking away. But I also wondered if the breakdown of our relationship had been my fault. Had I pushed her toward old feelings that she'd purposefully avoided for years? If I had never gone into Abe's bunker, never called H, never involved Emma in any of this, would we still be together? And Miss Peregrine, Miss P could be suffocating and frustrating and condescending, but she did have reason to be angry with me. So did my friends. The whole undertaking had been motivated to an uncomfortable degree by my own frustration with the Embrons and anger at my parents. The problem really was that I had been trying to navigate a world for which I had not been prepared. The peculiar universe was deeply complex, with rules and traditions and taxonomies and histories that even my friends, who had been studying it for nearly all of their long lives, had not yet wrapped their minds around. Newcomers should be required to train and study as hard as astronauts preparing for space, but when Miss Peregrine's loop collapsed, I was thrown into it with no choice but to swim for my life. Miraculously, through some combination of dumb luck, peculiar talent, and the bravery of my friends, I had survived, emerged victorious even. But luck isn't something you can depend on. And my mistake was thinking I could dive in again and everything would work out somehow. In a fit of pique and completely out of my own accord, I had jumped back into that dark water and had lashed several of my friends to me in the bargain, which was not only unwise, ultimately, but unkind, and I had very nearly died. I was underprepared and overconfident. I couldn't blame Miss Peregrine for that, so I couldn't even be mad at her, really, or at my friends. The more I mulled it over, the more my anger homed in on someone else, a person who hadn't even been present, a person who wasn't even alive. My grandfather. He had known, my whole life, who I was. He had known, as a peculiar, what I would have to face one day, but he had not prepared me for it at all. Why? Because I'd been rude to him in the 4th grade? Because I'd hurt his feelings? It was hard to believe he could have been so petty. Or was it, as Miss Peregrine had once suggested, because he was trying to spare me pain? Because he wanted me to grow up feeling normal? It was a sweet idea on its face, but not if I interrogated it a little bit, because he knew. He had lived here in this complicated and bloody and divided peculiar America. If he was really withholding the truth in order to spare me pain, he knew it was putting me at risk. Even if the Hollows never got me, some gang of peculiar Americans would have sniffed me out eventually. Imagine my surprise had I found out I was a peculiar that way, as some heartless highwayman's feral prize. Abe left me without a map, without a key, without a clue, without a single hint about how to navigate this strange new reality. It had been his duty to tell me, and he had not. How could he have been so careless? Because he didn't care. That nasty little voice in my head back again. I couldn't believe he hadn't cared. There had to be some other answer. And then I realized there was someone still living who might know it. Raphael? The bone mender stirred. He'd been sleeping in a chair by the window, the blue light of early morning washing over him. Yes, Master Portman? I need to get out of this bed. Three hours later, I was up and moving again. I had a purple bruise under one eye and my ribs still ached, but otherwise, Raphael had worked miracles, and I was feeling pretty good. I made my way back toward Bentham's Panlupticon as stealthily as I could, but there were people everywhere. The morning rush was in full swing, and I got stopped a few times for autographs. It still surprised me every time I was recognized. I had spent so much of my life as an unremarkable nobody that whenever I was approached, my first thought was that they had confused me for someone else. I knew I wasn't supposed to leave the acre. I was risking being seen by someone who would report me to Miss Peregrine, but that wasn't at the top of my list of concerns. I managed to make it through the front door, down the main hall, and upstairs to the Panlupticon hallways without being recognized. When the clerk at the Panlupticon entrance did, I told him I was going home and he waved me through. I ran down the hall, past busy travelers and officials at checkpoint desks, and Sharon's voice booming from an open door. I rounded a corner into the shorter hall where my door was, found the broom closet marked A. Peregrine and Wards Only, and dove inside. I walked out of the potting shed into the slanting sun and muggy heat of a Florida afternoon. My friends were in Devil's Acre. My parents were traveling in Asia. The house was empty. I went inside, settled onto a sofa in the living room, and took my phone out of my pocket. It still had a little battery left. I dialed H's number. After 3 rings, a man answered. Hongs, I'm calling for H. I said, hold on. In the background, I could hear voices, the noise of clattering plates. Then H came on the line. Hello? He said warily. It's Jacob. I figured the Imbrans would have had you under lock and key by now. Not quite, I said, but they're pretty angry. I'm sure they wouldn't be happy if they knew I was calling you either. He chuckled. I'm sure they wouldn't. I knew he was angry with me too. I could hear it in his voice. But he seemed to have forgiven me already, probably even before we talked. Hey, I'm glad you're all right. You had me worried. Yeah, I had me worried too. Why the hell didn't you listen to me? Now things are all fouled up. I know, I'm sorry. Let me help fix it. No, thank you. You've done quite enough. I should have aborted the mission when you told me to, I said. But I hesitated, worried this would sound like an accusation. Why didn't you tell me we were doing something illegal? Illegal? Where'd you get that? It's the clan's law. You can't take an uncontacted peculiar. We should all be free to go where we like, he interrupted. Any law that takes your freedom away should be ignored. Well, I agree, but the Imbrans are trying to negotiate a peace treaty between the clans and... You think I don't know that? He said, getting frustrated. The clans will go to war if that's what they want to do. And don't let anyone fool you into thinking it's got anything to do with you or me. Anyway, there's bigger things at stake than whether the damn clans want to fight with one another. Really? Like what? Like the girl. You mean Noor? Of course I mean her. And don't say her name out loud again. Why is she so important? I'm not going to tell you over an unsecured phone line. And anyhow, you don't need to know. Truth is, I should never have gotten you involved in the first place. I went against my better judgment. I broke a promise, too. And I'm sick about it. You nearly got killed because of it. What promise? To who? There was a pause. I might have thought the line had gone dead, but I could hear dishes rattling in the background. Finally, he said, to your grandfather. Which reminded me of the reason I'd called H in the first place. Why? I said. Why did he never tell me anything? Why would he ask you to keep secrets from me? Because he wanted to protect you, son. That was never going to be possible. All it did was leave me totally unprepared. He always meant to tell you who you were, but he died too soon to do it himself. Then what was he protecting me from? From our work. He didn't want you involved. Then why did he send me postcards from your missions, or make maps for me, or make my nickname the passcode to the bunker under his house? I heard H take a deep breath and let it out slowly. He was leaving you tools in case of an emergency, but that's it. Now I'm afraid you caught me on my way out. To do what? One last job, he replied. Then I'm retiring for good. You're going to try and get her back, aren't you? That's no business of yours. Wait for me. I'll come to you. I want to help. Please. No, thank you. Like I said, you've done quite enough. And you don't take orders. I will, I promise. Okay. And take this order. Go back to your life. Go back to your immigrants and your safe little world, because you aren't ready for this one yet. Maybe we'll meet again someday when you are. And then he hung up. Chapter 19. I stood in my living room, phone in hand, still listening to the silence on the dead line. My mind was racing. I had to get to H and quickly. I had to help him. I was green and inexperienced, yes, but he was old and out of practice. He needed me, even if he wouldn't admit it. He was right about one thing, though. I was terrible at taking orders. Oh well, it was a second chance at helping Noor. Maybe just a sliver of a chance, but at this point, I would take what I could get. First, I would have to find H. Luckily, I knew right where to start looking. On the book of matches where I'd first gotten his phone number. It was from a Chinese restaurant somewhere in Manhattan. When I'd called him this time, I'd heard what sounded like a restaurant in the background. A busy kitchen, maybe, or the dish prep area, and I was pretty sure someone who worked there had answered the phone. I figured H lived in the back, or above it. The name and address were on the matchbook, so it would be easy enough to find. I just had to get to New York. This time I didn't pack a bag or bring anything special. I changed the clothes I'd been in for days, which were blood-stained and beginning to smell a bit ripe, and then I ran out the back door and into the potting shed. Once I'd come out the other side and I was in the Panlupticon's hallway, I knew just where to go. Miss Peregrine had brought us back from New York through a door halfway down the hall on the Panlupticon's upper level. All I had to do was retrace our steps from the day before. It would have attracted too much attention to run, so I walked quickly with my head down, hoping none of the travelers or transport agents or desk clerks would notice me. I had made it all the way to the stairwell and up the stairs and into the upper hall without being stopped when I ran face first into a giant black wall. The wall spoke, and the booming voice that came out of it was unmistakably Sharon's. "Portman, aren't you supposed to be in Miss Wren's new menagerie loop, scraping out Grimbear cages?" Miss Peregrine had stormed out before she'd told me what my punishment was, but somehow Sharon knew. Embarrassing news travels fast. "How did you hear about that?" I said. "The walls have ears, my friend. I'll show you sometime. They need regular de-waxing." I shuddered and tried to put the image out of my mind. I was on my way there now. "How strange. That loop is downstairs." He crossed his arms and leaned down. "You caused quite a stir around here. You know that. Ruffled a lot of feathers." "My friends and I didn't mean to upset anyone, really." "I'm not saying you did a bad thing." He lowered his voice. "Sometimes feathers need to be ruffled, if you take my meaning." "Uh-huh," I said, fidgeting nervously. At any moment, an Imbrin could have walked by and seen me. "Not everyone likes the way the Imbrins have been running things. They're too used to making all the decisions by themselves. They don't consult anyone. They don't ask for opinions." "I know what you mean," I said. "Do you?" I did. I just didn't want to talk about it right at the moment. Sharon leaned closer and whispered in my ear. His breath was cold and smelled like earth. "There's a meeting next Saturday evening at the old abattoir. I'd like to see you there." "What kind of meeting?" I said. "Just some like-minded people kicking around ideas. Your presence would be much appreciated." I peered into his hood. There was a faint shine of white teeth engulfed in darkness. "I'll come," I said, "but don't expect me to go against the Imbrins." The gleam in his hood widened into a smile. "Isn't that where you're going now?" "It's more complicated than that." "I'm sure it is." Sharon stood up to his full height, then stepped out of my way. "Your secret's safe with me." He extended his hand. "You'll need this." It was a ticket. On one side was printed Ministry of Temporal Affairs, and on the other side, Anywhere. "The American loops are closely guarded. The situation there is tense. Can't let just anyone go." I tried to take the ticket from him, but he didn't let it go at first. "Saturday," he said, then opened his hand. Now that I was traveling alone, moving from place to place was easier. After having to worry over the whereabouts of 3 or 4 other people for most of the last week, it was freeing to be able to speed walk down a crowded hall without checking over my shoulder, to slip effortlessly into a crowd, to hand the clerk just my own ticket. He was a big man, perched on a tiny stool behind a desk, and he looked at my Anywhere ticket like he'd never seen one before. "You've, got modern clothes on," he said, looking me over. "Have you been checked for anachronisms by the costumers?" "Yep," I said. "They said I'm fine." "Did they give you a waiver?" Yeah, I said, patting my pockets. "Let me see where I put it." A line was stacking up behind me. The desk clerk was manning 5 doors at once, and he was losing patience. "Just, cover up with one of the coats inside the door there," he said, and waved me on. "There's a map in the pocket if you need one." I thanked him and went to the door. The little gold plate on it read, "Bullock's Department Store, New York, February 8th, 1937. I stepped through, lifted an old-looking black coat from a hook inside the door, emergency wardrobe, and pulled it on over my clothes. I walked to the back of the tiny, featureless room, and after a quick blackout and the now familiar temporal rush, I heard the noises beyond the door change. I walked out into a department store. It looked like it had recently closed. The floor was full of empty racks and dusty, naked mannequins, and a muted glow was cast over everything from windows that had been papered with newsprint. There was a sleepy guard by the front entrance, and I could tell by his uniform, which looked a lot like the desk clerk's, that he was one of ours. His job was to screen people entering Devil's Acre, not bother people leaving it. So as a solo traveler with no baggage, it was easier to get past him with just a self-assured nod. Then I was out on the street, speed walking down 6th Avenue on a dim winter day, past a laundry billowing steam onto the sidewalk, past mounds of black snow, past a line of shivering men in threadbare coats and a sign that read, "Hot meals 1 cent." I reached into my coat's pocket to find a rudimentary map. It showed the Loop department store entrance, and a half-mile ahead of me, its outer membrane, beyond which lay the present. The map was marked with an instruction to burn after reading, so I tossed it into a flaming barrel around which a group of ragged men were huddled. Starting to shiver myself, I ran. After a few blocks, I could feel the air begin to thin and tremble around me. A short distance later, I passed through the loop membrane, out of 1937, and back into the present. The air warmed and brightened instantly, and the buildings rose to towering heights. I hailed a cab, gave the driver the address from the matchbook, and 10 minutes later, we pulled up outside a brick building wrapped in fire escapes. On the street level was a small Chinese restaurant, Hong's. There were ducks hanging in the window and a fringed red lantern above the door. I paid the cabbie, went inside, and asked a waiter for H. He looked confused, so I showed him the matchbook, and then he nodded and took me outside. "Number 4, around the back," he said, pointing to an alley. "Tell him rent is coming Wednesday." There was a payphone in the alley. a strangely old-fashioned thing in modern-day New York, housed in a box with a door that folded open. The phone box stood between the back entrance to Hong's, where I could hear food frying and dishes clanking, and a door that led into a run-down apartment building lobby. I pushed it open and came into a room with mailboxes along one wall and 2 elevators on the other, one marked out of order. Which floor? I pressed the elevator button, and as it dinged, the door slid open. I felt it, that prick in my gut when a hollow was close. The sensation could mean the hollow was in the building at that moment, or that it had come and gone so many times that it had left a lasting trail. The hollow could only belong to H. I got into the elevator and pressed the top floor button. The door creaked shut. The car began to rise. As it climbed, I could feel the compass point pain in my belly shifting 180 degrees straight up at first, then lower the higher I went. When I passed the 14th floor, it was nearly a level 90 degrees, so I hit the button for 15. The car stopped. The door opened. Right away, I noticed 2 things that seemed very wrong. The first was a trail of blood running down the middle of the hall. When I saw it, I looked down at my feet. The trail led to the rear corner of the elevator car in a rapidly congealing puddle. My chest began to pound. Someone was hurt, and hurt badly. The second thing was that halfway down the long hall there was no light. None at all. It wasn't simply dim. I couldn't see the walls, the floor, the ceiling, and my compass was pointing directly into the dark. It meant Noor was here. Noor was here, and something terrible had happened. I was too late. I sprinted down the hall, following the trail of blood into the darkness. When I could no longer see my feet hitting the floor, I slowed a little and stuck out my arms, letting the pain in my stomach be my guide. I rounded a corner, stumbled over a box someone had left in the hall. After a few more strides into the dark, the compass swung sharply left toward an apartment door. It had been left open a crack, and through it I could see, finally, a sliver of light. I shouldered the door open. It was unexpectedly heavy, as if made from reinforced steel. I followed the light down a short hall, through a cramped kitchen, piled up with dirty pots, into a den. A dingy warren festooned with potted plants and pervaded by a cloyingly sweet smell. Curled on a sofa in the corner was Noor. Her body filled the room with a soft orange glow. She wasn't moving. I ran to her. Her hair was covering her face. I rolled her gently onto her back, squinting against the light that shone from inside her. I pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Her skin was hot to the touch. After a moment, I found an artery and a pulse, and I breathed a sigh of relief. A strange, keening wail sounded from across the room. I spun to look. H lay splayed on his back on an old Persian rug. His hollow-gassed sat astride him, one muscled tongue lashed around H's waist, and the other 2 around his wrists. The thing looked like it was about to crack open his skull and eat his brain. "Get away!" I shouted, and the wailing stopped as the hollow hissed at me. It was not about to kill him, I realized. Its friend was dying. It was crying. I summoned a few words of hollow-speak to shoo the creature away. It hissed at me again, unwound its tongues reluctantly from H's wrist, and scuttled into the kitchen. I crouched beside the old man. Blood had soaked through his shirt, his pants, and the carpet beneath him. H, it's Jacob Portman. Can you hear me? He sharpened, his eyes fixed on me. Damn it, son, he said, scowling. You really don't follow orders for shit. We've got to get you to a hospital. I began to slide my arms underneath him. He groaned in pain, and the hollow gas let out a howl from the kitchen. Forget it. I've lost too much blood already. You can make it. We just have to... He wrenched away from me. No! His voice and his arms were so strong that it shocked me. But then he collapsed back to the floor. Don't make me sick Horatio on you. A whole neighborhood is crawling with Leo's guys. If I go out there again, it'll rain bullets. Nora moaned from the corner. I looked over to see her shift on the couch, eyes still closed. She'll be okay, said H. She got sleep dusted pretty good, but she'll come out of it. He winced and his eyes went a little glassy. Water. I sprang up to run to the kitchen, but before I could take 3 steps, a hollow gas tongue was already sliding through the air past me, wrapped around a sloshing glass. I helped H sit up while the hollow's tongue tipped the glass to his lips, marveling at the strange tenderness of it. H finished drinking, and the hollow's tongue ferried the glass away and set it down on the coffee table, on a coaster. You've got him trained pretty good, I said. Should have by now, H replied. Been together 40 years. We're like an old married couple. He tipped his head to look down at himself. God, they made Swiss cheese out of me. He coughed a mist of blood into the air. The hollow groaned and bounced on its haunches. It had crept out of the kitchen and was crouched nearby, and its black eyes wept oily tears down its cheeks and onto a stained handkerchief tied around its neck. I looked at H, and suddenly I wanted to cry too. It's happening again, I thought, a sob forming in my chest. I'm losing another one. I swallowed back the sob and managed to say, What happened? Should have been a piece of cake, he croaked. A simple extraction. If it weren't for Horatio, who carried us both out of there, we'd all be Leo's prisoners now. He sighed. Guess I got old. Why didn't you let me help you? Couldn't risk you getting hurt, he said. He looked past me at the ceiling, picturing something. Abe's special boy. Baby Moses and the reeds. What do you mean? I said. His head turned to Nor. You can help Miss Pradesh now. I'm dying, so there's nobody else. What do I do? Where do we go? Out of New York for starters. We could go to Devil's Acre. No. Imrans would only send her back to Leo. They don't know how important she is. He was fading, starting to mumble. Neither does she. Why is she important? You know, before she got dusted, she saved my ass about 3 times today. Thought I was supposed to be saving hers. He laughed weakly. Too bad a light bulb trick can't stop bullets. His thoughts were running away from him, his eyes beginning to close. I put my hand on his cheek, his rough beard, and forced him to look at me. H, why is she important? I made a vow to your grandfather not to involve you. We're way past that now. He nodded sadly. I guess we are. He drew a shaky breath. She's one of the 7 whose coming was foretold. Of all the things I thought he might say to me, that was not among them. One of the 7? 7 what? They will be the emancipators of peculiardom. So says the Apocryphon. What is that? Some kind of prophecy? Writings from long ago. Her birth signals the arrival of a new age, a very dangerous one. He grimaced in pain and shut his eyes. That's why those people are hunting her. The ones with the helicopter and the black cars? The same, he said. They're one of the clans? No. Much worse. A very old, very secret society of normals who want to subvert it. He winced, sucking air through his teeth. Control us. He was losing his breath now, gasping between words. No time for history lessons. Take the girl to V. She's the last of us. The last of the hunters. V, I said, my mind starting to reel. From Abe's mission log? The one he trained himself? Yes. She lives in the big wind. Doesn't want to be found. So be careful. Horatio. The map is in the safe. The hologast grunted, loped over to the wall, and moved a picture aside to reveal a small safe. While Horatio spun the number wheel, I focused on H. I could feel him slackening. I squeezed his hand. H, I have to know something. He was slipping away, and the idea that this last, best link to my grandfather's secrets was about to be severed shook something loose in me, something I'd been trying to bury since I heard it. Why would someone call my grandfather a murderer? H looked at me with new intensity. Who said that to you? I leaned in close. He was shaking. I told him quickly about the insane things Leo had accused Abe of. Stealing his goddaughter, killing people. Not just people. Kids. H might have said, the whites made it all up. He might have said simply, it's a lie. But he didn't say either of those things. He said, so you know. My vision blurred for a moment, and doubt, like a virus, began to spread through me. What do you mean? What are you talking about? I had H by the shoulders. I was shaking him. The hologast screamed, whipped a tongue around my waist, and pulled me away from H. I was flung halfway across the room, skidding across the floor into the leg of a table. A terrible fear had invaded me. Oh, God.
Bless you.
Something terrible invaded me too. God. Sorry, I could not control that. Oh my God. That there had been truth to Leo's accusations. That this was my grandfather's secret. He had not been trying to protect me from a loss of normalcy, or from the hollows, or from a mysterious band of enemies and black cars. He had been protecting me from himself. I picked myself up off the floor. The hollow was hissing at me, bent over H, blocking him from view. I commanded it in hollow speak to move, but it was fighting me. Or maybe H and the hollow were both fighting me now. I ran toward the Hologhast, yelling, "Go! Go! Let him go!" And it did, leaping away from H and up to the ceiling where it clung to a light fixture with its tongues. I fixed, for a split second, on an odd detail. A forest of tree-shaped air fresheners suspended from the ceiling. To combat the smell, of course, because the hollow lived here. I knelt down over H. I'm sorry. This time I didn't touch him. Please tell me what he did. They fooled us. 7 times. They fooled us. Who? What? The society. I was half listening. I only wanted to know one thing. Did my grandfather kill children? No. No. Did he kidnap them? No. His face swam with pain and what seemed like regret. We thought, he gasped for breath, that we were saving. I sank back on my heels, suddenly lightheaded. He wasn't a killer. He wasn't a bad man. I hadn't realized how much it had been weighing on me, the very notion. We did a lot of good, he said. We also made some mistakes. But Abe's heart was always in the right place. And he loved you very, very much. His voice had diminished to a whisper. A rush of tears stung my eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be. With the last of his strength, he touched my arm. Torch, it's yours now. I'm just sorry. There aren't more people to help you carry it. Thank you, I said. I'll try to do you both proud. I know you will. He smiled. Now, it's time. He looked up to the ceiling. Horatio, come down here. The hollow strained against my control. Let him come down, said H. A long time ago, I made this poor creature a promise. It's got to be done before I die. Let him come. I stood up, backed away, and let go. The Hologhast dropped to the floor. Come here, Horatio. I can feel myself going. Come here. The hollow crept towards H. The old man tried to turn away from me. "Don't look. I don't want this to be your last memory of me." The hollow gas straddled H and sat on his chest. When I realized what was about to happen, I tried to command the hollow gas to move. I shouted at the thing, but H was blocking me. I could hear him whispering to the creature. "You've been a real good boy, Horatio. Remember what I taught you. Now, go on." The hollow gas whimpered, trembling. "It's okay," H said gently, stroking the creature's claw-like hand. "It'll be okay." I looked away as it happened, though I'll never forget the sound it made. When I looked back, his eyes were gone. The sockets looked like ripe plums with bites taken out of them. The hologast was chewing, and its shoulders were shaking, and it was making a noise that seemed caught between agony and ecstasy. After a minute, it stood and turned slowly away as if filled with shame. "I forgive you," H said. "I forgive you, brother." He seemed not to be speaking to the hollow, but to the air, to a ghost. And then he was gone. The hologast and I stared at each other across H's body. I tried to gain control of it. "Sit down." I had thought, if anything, it would be easier to control now that its master was dead, but my command had no effect. I tried a second time, and then a third, with no results. I started planning ways to kill the thing, before it got a mind to come after my eyeballs next, and then Noor's. The hologast ratcheted its jaws open all the way, reeled out its 3 tongues, and made a terrifying sound, a squeal so high-pitched I thought the windows might crack. I grabbed a brass paperweight from a nearby table and steeled myself for a nasty fight. But the hologast wasn't coming for me. It was stumbling backward, and after a few steps, its back hit the wall and came to a stop. And then the dull directional pain that told me where the hollow was at all times began, very rapidly, to fade. At the same time, the creature's tongues began to shrink. They shriveled and curled up and turned a deathly brown, and then they fell off, having withered like dead flowers. The hollow was leaning against the wall with its head bowed and chest rising and falling as if it had just run a marathon. Then it collapsed to the floor, and its body began to shiver in the grip of a violent seizure. I began to cross the room slowly, approaching it with careful, measured steps in case this was a trick. Then, as suddenly as they'd begun, the seizures stopped. At the same time, the pain in my gut vanished. The hollow began to stir. It turned its head and looked up at me. Its eyes were no longer black, weeping pools. Now they were gray, enlightening more by the second, gradually turning a pupilless blank. The creature was transforming into something else. It was becoming a white. I watched it for a minute, queasy but fascinated, ready to bash its head in with the paperweight if I needed to. Its body began to squirm, The movement seemed involuntary, like its organs were metamorphosing inside its chest cavity. Its breathing, which had been wet and ragged like a hollow gasp, quieted and became regular. It was almost like witnessing a birth. It sat up and looked at me. I took a step backward, gripped by a sudden idea. This creature had been H's constant companion for years. It had seen and overheard all sorts of things, and now it was almost human. What might it remember, if it could remember anything at all? How much of its past life as a hologas did a white retain? How quickly did its memories fade? Say something, I commanded it. Speak. It just stared at me, didn't even grunt. Maybe whites were born like livestock animals, able to stand and even to run, but mute, knowing nothing. It reached out its arm, steadied itself against the wall, and rose slowly to its feet. It shuffled a short distance to an end table and ripped the tablecloth away. I thought for a moment it was going to tie the cloth around its waist, as if the creature had suddenly realized it was naked and felt shame, but instead it hobbled to H, knelt beside him, and settled the cloth over his face. That meant it remembered something. H had been its master. Can you speak? I said. I want to hear your voice. It turned to look at me, its face slack, swaying slightly on its feet. Its mouth fell open. A sound came out. A moan. Not a word, but it was better than nothing. Yes, I said. What's your name? It rocked its head from side to side. It was trying mightily to form words, but there seemed to be a great fog clouding its brain. It opened its mouth again, sucked in a breath. A scream shattered the silence. Noor was sitting up now and terrified, her eyes going from the white to me to H, dead under his shroud. It's all right, I shouted. Everything's fine. But my strained tone and everything before her contradicted that. Now that the hollow was transforming, it could be seen by anyone. She had woken suddenly into a terrifying scene, and the light inside her, which had been pulsing gently while she was asleep, was now a sharp and brightening star rising up the column of her throat. I moved toward her, repeating that she wasn't in danger, but she was shaking her head and couldn't seem to speak. She looked afraid, not of me or the white or the dead man, but of the thing inside her she didn't know how to stop. She was a brand new peculiar and couldn't fully control her ability yet. I flung myself to the floor and covered my head with my arms. Through the split fingers, I saw Noor grip the sofa and turn away from me. Like a sneeze made of light, an explosion came out of her nose and mouth, a cone-shaped jet engine exhalation that roared through the air and blasted into the kitchen. The walls, the floor, the whole apartment shook. A hot pressure wave blew over me, singeing the fine hairs on the back of my neck. There was an all-encompassing din of tile cracking and dishes breaking and metal warping, and the sudden, dazzling glare of the blast forced my eyes shut. When it had dimmed again, I raised my head. There was a new light in the room. Not the reddish-orange glow that had emanated from Noor, but daylight, streaming through an open window. Smoke was pouring out of the kitchen. The half-hollow was nowhere to be seen. The blast recoil had sent Nor flying over the couch and onto the floor, where I could hear her groaning. "Nor?" I sat up slowly. "Are you hurt?" "My head's killing me," I heard her say, and then her face appeared from behind the couch. "Otherwise," she glanced down at herself. "No holes." Smoke wafted from her lips as she spoke. "You?" "I'm okay," I said. "I don't know if you remember me, but Jacob." She stayed behind the couch, watching me. "What are you doing here?" I sat up a little straighter. "I came to help you." "That hasn't been working out so well." She looked at H and winced. "For anyone." She let her face fall onto the couch. "I keep telling myself, none of this is happening," she said into the cushions. "But I can't seem to wake up from the nightmare." She looked up at me. "Damn, you're still here." "It's not a dream," I said. "I went through the same thing just a few months ago. I know exactly what you're feeling." "I'm sure you don't," she said. "Just tell me what the hell is happening." That would take hours, but the Cliff's Notes version is, bad people want to get their hands on you, I'm one of the good guys, and we need to get you out of New York as quickly as possible. "You don't even know me. Why are you helping me?" "It's a little hard to explain, but it's kind of the family business." I glanced behind me at H. "Also, I made a promise." "Does anything you say ever make sense?" "It'll start to." I stood up and went to her. "Can you walk?" She grabbed the arm of the couch and put her weight on it as she stood, then took a step. "Looks like it," she said. "How about run?" I asked. She wobbled a little, then sat heavily on the cushions. "Still getting my strength back," she said. "And where are we running to exactly?" "To find someone named V. She used to work with H and my grandfather. That's all I know." She laughed and shook her head. "This is crazy." "It always is. You'll get used to it." There was a noise from behind us, and we both turned to see the rounded white back of the thing that had formerly been a hologast, but was not yet quite a white. It was crouched in the window like a gargoyle, gripping the frame with its hands. Its body was aimed toward the street as if it were about to jump. Nor recoiled into the cushions. "His name is Horatio," I said. "You couldn't see him before, but he was always by that old man's side." The half-hollow said, turning to look at us over its shoulder. It seemed to be trying to speak. "6? Is that what you said?" I took an excited step toward it, and it gave a squeal of warning and started to let go. I froze and raised both hands. "Don't!" It looked both newborn and unfathomably old, and so tired. It opened its mouth again. Said the half-hollow. Nor sat forward on the couch. Was that a D? "5," I said. I looked at Nor, excited. It's talking to us. They sounded like grid coordinates, said Noor. E6D5, like on a map. Like on a map of days. In the storm, said the half-hollow in a high, tremulous voice. It could talk. In the heart of the storm. What is? I said. What's in the heart of the storm? The one you seek. It lifted one hand from the window and pointed at the wall with the safe in it, which was now hanging open. I got up and ran to it. The wind from Noor's blast had blown off the door, and the floor was strewn with papers, a money clip stuffed with bills, a single photograph, a book, and an old, worn-looking map. I bent down and picked up the photograph. It was a black and white snapshot of a little town with a threatening sky and the black funnel of a tornado bearing down in the distance. The heart of the storm in the big wind. I held the photo up. Is this where we're supposed to find V? I looked back to find the window empty, and where the half-hollow had been a moment earlier, there was just a curtain blowing in the breeze. I turned to Noor. What happened? She was on her feet halfway to the window, eyes wide. He just let go. Voices were shouting from the street below. Noor rushed over to look. Don't! I hissed. They could see you. She caught herself too late and ducked down below the window. I think they just did. It's fine. We'll find a back way out. I gathered the map, the money, and the photo and met Noor under the window. We were both in a crouch, our knees touching, a breeze tousling our hair. Are you ready? I said. No. But she looked unafraid, challenging me with her eyes. Do you trust me? Hell no. I laughed. We can work on that. I offered her my hand. She took it. And there is the photo.
Right.
You gotta let Dad see it. Dad's here. Dad can't see it because the ring light takes up all the space.
Actually, the phone is perfectly blocking it.
The phone perfectly blocks the page. I gotta make sure that it perfectly is in front of the camera every single time. Anyway, and that is the end of Map of Days. So, do you trust me? Hell no. Probably a good choice. I wouldn't trust Jacob either.
No.
He's proven to be incompetent at every turn.
No. Honestly, he's actually a schmuck.
I hope you all enjoyed it.
I did. I especially enjoyed Maggie doing her
Maggie
shit.
is having a whole time over here. She has been like on this, like just searching for an exit for like the past half hour at least. He is neither the hero we want or need. Very much an unreliable main character. Yes, hybrid hollow. It's a white. At this point, it grows into a white. It's going through the white process, whatever that is. So now we got a half white hollow. Maggie says, "Can confirm." His dump stats are His dump stats are intelligence and wisdom, and all his points are in luck. Is what Lady
Facts.
Eva said.
Fucking facts.
Accurate. Alright, we have less than 10 minutes left to do cat facts. Who wants cat facts? Cats. Okay. We're doing the Egyptian Mao today. The Egyptian Mao cat has a striking spotted coat, making it one of only a few cat breeds marked in such a way. Egyptian Maos are also one of the rarest cat breeds in the world. Besides their rare spots and shiny, glittery coat, Egyptian Mao cats look very average in the mathematical sense. They're medium size and weight, strong but not stocky, with head shape neither too angled nor too round. On their foreheads, they have the randomly streaky marks often seen on the foreheads of tabby cats. In Egyptian Maos, these marks are shaped vaguely like an M, or thematically like a scarab beetle. Egyptian Mao cats all have green eyes, and there are just 3 colors: silver, bronze, and smoke. Smoke-colored Egyptian Mao cats even have black whiskers. The spots on all colors of Egyptian Maos are made by ticking, which are the bands of color along individual hairs that also give Abyssinians their special glowing color. It's also rumored that an Egyptian Mao cat was used in the breeding process that created the Bengal cat. To go with their medium size and average shape, Egyptian Mao cats have moderate temperaments. In fact, their averageness may not be a coincidence, because experts believe them to be an ancient breed that helped to originate the modern domestic cat in the first place. Their spots may therefore be a preserved holdover from a truly wild ancestor many centuries ago. Egyptian Mao cats are curious, clever, and acrobatic, perhaps having helped define these as traits so many other domestic cats have as well. Khajiit has wares.
If you have coin.
Sorry if someone...
No, it's fine.
Little baby. Right there you go.
Baby.
Right in front of the camera.
That's fine. He's right in front of the camera. That's fine.
You know how long it's been since I've seen Advent Children? Someone had an Egyptian Mao named Kadesh. From Advent Children. Here's the smoke. Oh, probably.
You've probably seen it more recently than I have.
I
I think I saw it like a month after it came out, and I haven't watched it again. So, like, probably you've seen it sooner than I have.
I own that movie on a very specific platform, and when I tell you the platform, you will know why it's been a long time. Guess what I have Advent Children on. Just guess. I'm never gonna guess it, but just try. Just try.
Voodoo.
Voodoo?
Or like the you can buy shit. You can buy it on Voodoo.
No. Guess. Maybe I shouldn't have said platform. Guess which medium I own Advent Children on.
VHS.
No.
DVD.
No.
Is it before?
It's so niche.
Jump drive.
Nope.
Laser disc.
I'll accept it. I'll accept it. It's not right, but I'll accept it.
Laserdisc was before Beta Max.
Yeah, but like it is technically a laser disc. It is not, however, a DVD. But I will go ahead and accept it because you're never going to guess it.
Okay. That's fair.
PSP cartridge.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh my God.
That is how long.
Do you still have the
That is how
PSP to
long.
play it?
Yeah, I do. It is
Okay.
under this couch. I know
Okay.
exactly where my PSP
Okay.
is.
My bad. I didn't mean to like trigger you there for a second.
I know exactly where the movie is, and I know exactly where my PSP is. I could watch it. I'm not going to, but I could.
God, I haven't fucking watched him forever.
That is how long it has been. Probably since high school, around thereabouts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about when it came out.
Damn, that is awesome. I forgot this existed. Yeah, people forgot that you could just play movies on a PSP if you had one. You could just play movies. They sold movies on it. I have
they
Saw
did.
on the PSP too. Saw and Advent Children.
Hell yeah.
I was going for a vibe and
I think you got it.
yeah, no, I still love my PSP. Sometimes I still play Dissidia on there. I don't really play a whole lot else, but I do play Dissidia sometimes when I get nostalgic. I achieved the vibe.
That's like me and turning
I
on the...
bought 300 for my husband for the PSP. Good choice.
When I'm feeling nostalgic, I hook up the fucking 64 and play Conker's Bad Fur Day.
I no longer have anything that old that still works. Somehow the PSP still works pretty well.
Oh, this is my
Yeah.
original 64.
Better than it does. You do Kirby 64?
Hell yeah.
Pon on the PSP is amazing. Could you imagine now essentially getting a game for PSP at this point? I'm sure they
I'm
ported
sure we
it
could've-
to Switch or something.
Or, you know, would have been real hilarious as after we had dinner, we could have gone over to the little game exchange
Your
shop.
PSP still works too. They were good. Like, I've had many consoles that just stop working over the year, right? But the PSP has been ultimately still, like, it's still trucking. It might, like, make a weird noise, but it does work. You'll hear the disc, like, and it'll start, like...
You feel slight vibration from it.
It feels like it's gonna heat up, but it doesn't get hot. It just expels air. Like it's like it's trying to heat up, but it just can't get that hot or something. But it
Too much
still
work.
works. It'll still do things. And I'm still like, are you okay? Are you good? It's like listening to a person with severe arthritis get up and you're like, I'm a little worried, but they manage it. They manage to get up every single
Fuck
time.
you.
So you're like, okay, I know you're going to say that. And you're like, okay.
I am the PSP of the room.
You
right
are
now.
the PSP. And I am the table. Okay.
Not the wheeze laugh. Oh god.
Anyway, speaking of video games, they don't make devices like that anymore. Anyway, speaking of video games, we're going to move over to the stream I already got set up. I have no idea what we're playing. But we're going to do things.
We could play Borderlands together.
We're going to do things. I don't know. Someone said they wanted me to play Cozy Grove, and I'm like, I'm down for it. I just don't know how exciting of a stream that would be.
Okay.
I think it was Corey, maybe. Somebody said something about playing Amnesia. I'm not sure. But nobody's voted Borderlands. I normally leave this up as a community enterprise of what people want to watch.
That's fair.
So I'm unsure. But we, the two of us, as a unit, could play Borderlands on our own time.
True.
True. You're here for whatever. Ray said Cozy Grove. Ray really likes the soundtrack to Cozy Grove. And I get it. It's so relaxing.
It is.
It is so chill. It is such a chill, cute game. And it's just me running around stealing grasshoppers, making a brick wall, feeding cats. It doesn't... The game... There's not much more to it than that. It's like Animal Crossing in that way, where it's kind of like, you just do whatever, like, it's whatever you choose to do.
Excuse me.
Anyway, of course, I will see you all next week. We do this every week, every Tuesday at 8 Central. Come back and join us. And we're going to be starting book 5, so that'll be fun. And for everybody else, if you want to join me on the game stream, you know where to find it. I'm not going through this again. If you know, you know. And if you don't, it's not my responsibility to walk you through it and hold your hand through everything. You can find it. It's out there. Do a cursory search and you will figure it out. Anyway, thank you guys for coming. You guys have a great night.